Red Fox recognized her savior 5 years later. Her reaction shocked everyone. Can a wild animal remember kindness? Not instinct, not a habit of being fed, but a single act performed on the brink of life and death? This question had not yet crossed the mind of young gamekeeper Yegor Sokolov as he choked on smoke and drove his old quad bike along the wall of fire. The air roared and crackled. The taiga, his home, his work, his life, was burning. The heat had been going on for a month, and the dry forest had caught fire like gunpowder. Behind him, huddled against the seat, sat Grom. The intelligent sheepdog did not bark or whine. The dog sniffed the hot air intently, his ears twitching nervously. It was not just a dog barking. It was a signal. Before we continue, let us know which city you are from. We are interested to know where our videos are being watched. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your rating. This motivates us to make new and interesting videos. Well, let's get started. Suddenly, Grom jumped to the ground and froze, turning his head toward the fiery inferno. Igor stopped. Through the roar of the flames, he heard what his faithful dog had picked up. A thin, desperate squeak. It wasn't a bird's cry or a wolf's howl. It was something else. Grom rushed forward, straight toward the edge of the fire. Yegor shouted at him, but the dog didn't listen. Risking being cut off by the fire, the gamekeeper rushed after him. He pulled a wet handkerchief over his face, his eyes watering from the acrid smoke. And there, on a small patch of land, surrounded by fire on all sides, he saw it. A small, fiery red ball of fur huddled against the charred trunk of a pine tree. A lynx cub. It was all alone, darting from side to side, hissing at the fire. But the flames only tightened their ring. Thunder rumbled a few meters away, not coming closer so as not to scare it even more. It whimpered softly, looking at its owner. Its eyes were pleading. "Save me." Yegor knew that the mother lynx had most likely died or been unable to reach her cub. The lynx cub didn't stand a chance. The decision came instantly. He tore off his thick canvas jacket, doused it with the remaining water from his flask, and stepped into the inferno. The heat scorched his eyebrows. Sparks burned through his clothes. The lynx hissed, baring its tiny but sharp claws. It was ready to fight for its life to the last. Yegor did not hesitate. With one swift movement, he covered the lynx with his jacket, pressed its fluttering body to himself, and rushed back to the saving coolness of the green forest. When he emerged from the smoke and unfolded his jacket, two huge, frightened eyes, the color of wild honey, stared back at him. The lynx's paws were burned, and a black mark from a smoldering branch was visible on its red side. At home, they were met by Yegor's father, Roman, an old gamekeeper. He looked at his son's find with disapproval. "You brought a wild animal into the house," he grumbled, but immediately took ointment and bandages out of the first aid kit. "It won't live, Yegor. It's too weak." But they were wrong. While the men were treating the tiny paws, something strange happened. Thunder, the storm of the poachers, and the master of these forests, cautiously approached the box in which the lynx cub had been placed. He whimpered softly, then lay down next to it, resting his large head on the edge. The lynx, which had been trembling and hissing at everyone, suddenly fell silent. He tentatively stretched his nose toward the dog's nose. Yegor and his father froze, watching this silent scene. That evening, the most incredible friendship was born, one that the Siberian taiga had never seen before. Yegor named the lynx kitten Ira. In the language of one of the indigenous peoples, this name meant fire. Ira survived. Her paws healed, leaving thin scars. The burn on her side turned into a dark spot on her fiery fur. She grew quickly, transforming from a clumsy kitten into a graceful little predator. But her wild nature was strangely intertwined with her new life. She never let Yegor or his father pet her, but she always slept next to Grom, burrowing into his warm fur. They played for hours in the yard. The huge sheepdog would gently grab the lynx by the scruff of the neck, and she, in turn, would try to catch his fluffy tail. Grom shared his food with her. He protected her from strange dogs and even from the neighbors' cats, who ran away in terror at the sight of this strange couple. Months passed. Ira grew up. Her instincts took over. She began to hunt mice, then birds. Igor understood that this could not go on for long. Keeping a wild animal in the house was wrong and dangerous. One day she would run away into the forest, but accustomed to humans and dogs, she would not be able to survive in the wild. She would be easy prey for wolves or poachers. The decision was agonizing. Yegor found a rehabilitation center for wild animals. It was far away, hundreds of kilometers away, in another region. But there were specialists there who could prepare Ira for her return to the taiga. The farewell was difficult. Ira seemed to sense the trouble ahead. She didn't want to get into the carrier, clinging to Yegor's legs and rubbing against Grom. Grom whined pitifully, as he had never done before. All the way to the center, he lay with his head on his owner's knees, never taking his eyes off the carrier. When Yegor handed Ira over to the center staff, she let out a strange, guttural cry. It contained everything: fear, resentment, and a desperate cry for help. Yegor promised himself that he would definitely visit her. He did not know that it would take him 5 long years to fulfill that promise. 5 years. For a human being, that's a long time. For a dog, it's almost half a lifetime. For a wild animal, it's an eternity. Yegor's life changed. He married Lena, a local teacher. They had a daughter, Katya. He built a new, big house. His work as a gamekeeper still took up all his time. New problems arose in the forest, a brazen gang of poachers who feared no one and nothing. Yegor waged a silent war against them, finding and disarming their snares and breaking up illegal hunts. Grom grew old. His movements became slower, and gray hair appeared on his muzzle. But he was still a loyal companion. Sometimes at night, Yegor would hear the dog whimpering softly in his sleep and shifting his paws. The gamekeeper knew that his faithful friend was once again chasing a little red whirlwind named Ira around the yard. Memories of her became part of the family legend, a story he sometimes told his little daughter before bedtime. Hundreds of kilometers away, at the Hope Rehabilitation Center, a strong adult lynx was living her life. Ira. She had grown into a magnificent animal. Her fiery coat glistened in the sun. But there was something wild and distant in her eyes. She never managed to make friends with the other lynxes. She spent most of her time in the far corner of her spacious enclosure, watching the world through the mesh. The center's employees noted her intelligence, but kept their distance. Ira showed no aggression, but she didn't let anyone get close to her. About a year ago, a new veterinarian, Anton Orloff, arrived at the center. He was a man with an expensive watch and a cheap soul. He immediately noticed the unique lynx, her unusual color, her calm strength. But he did not see the beauty of nature. He saw merchandise. Lev, expensive merchandise for a wealthy client who dreamed of owning an exotic cat. One evening, when Yegor returned from a difficult raid in the forest, the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. The male voice on the other end sounded tired and anxious. "Yegor Sokolov. This is Peter. I used to work at the Nadezhda Center. Do you remember bringing us a lynx about 5 years ago? Yegor's heart skipped a beat. Yes, of course, I remember. Ira. What's wrong with her? Things are bad, Yegor, sighed the voice. The center is bankrupt. They're closing us down. The animals are being sold off. Some to zoos, and some just wherever. A guy wants to buy your Ira for his private collection. Our vet, Orlov, arranged everything. He says the money is good. But I know what these collections are. They're 3-by-3-meter cages in the basement of some nouveau riche. Yegor's eyes darkened. He imagined his free-spirited Ira, his red-haired Spark, locked up in a cramped basement. When? He asked hoarsely. They're coming to pick her up in 2 days. That's why I'm calling. You're the only one who really cared about her. I'm sorry. There's nothing else I can do. Yegor didn't sleep that night. He sat on the porch with old Grom lying next to him. The dog seemed to sense his anxiety. Yegor looked at the stars and realized that he couldn't let this happen. He had made a promise. Not to Era, not to his father, but to himself. That he would save her. And he had to do it again. Early in the morning, he said to his wife, Lena, I need to go away for a couple of days. Remember I told you about the lynx? Lena understood everything from his eyes. She just nodded and hugged him tightly. An hour later, Yegor's old UAZ was already speeding eastward on the highway. Grom sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window. He didn't know where they were going, but he knew that his master needed his help, and he was ready. They were driving toward the past, not knowing what lay ahead, not knowing that the wild memory of a beast would prove stronger than time, and that Ira's reaction to their appearance would shock everyone and change not only her fate. The road stretched out like an endless gray ribbon. Every kilometer brought Yegor closer to his goal, and at the same time increased his anxiety. What would he say? What would he do? He had neither money nor connections. All he had was an old UAZ, a faithful dog, and a sense of duty that was heavier than any load. Grom slept, occasionally twitching his paws in his sleep. He was probably dreaming of the taiga, the chase, and his little red-haired friend, who hunted his tail so comically. Yegor smiled bitterly. 5 years. He wasn't even sure if Ira remembered him. Animals live by instinct, not memories. That's what his father used to say. But something inside Yegor refused to believe it. The bond between the three of them couldn't just disappear. It was real. It had been forged in fire. The Hope Center greeted them with silence and desolation. Once upon a time, this place had been bustling with life. But now the paint on the sign was peeling. The paths were overgrown with weeds, and the air was thick with a heavy smell of despair. Yegor left Grom in the car, telling him to wait, and went to the main building. The door creaked discontentedly. Inside, behind a shabby table, sat a man of about 35 in a spotless, expensive tourist jacket. He was lazily leafing through a magazine. It was Anton Orlov. Yegor knew it immediately. The man exuded an aura of cold calculation. "Who are you looking for?" Anton asked without even looking up. "I'm Yegor Sokolov. I brought a lynx here 5 years ago, Ira. I got a call saying you had a problem." Anton finally looked up from his magazine. He looked Yegor up and down. He assessed his simple work clothes and weather-beaten face. A flash of contempt crossed the veterinarian's eyes. "Ah, the gamekeeper," he said with a fake smile. "Yes, there were problems, but not anymore. Everything has been resolved. The lynx, as you call it, will find a new, wonderful home." "What kind of home?" Yegor asked bluntly. I was told she was being sold to a private collection. The smile faded from Anton's face. That's none of your business, sir. You handed the animal over to the center. Legally, it no longer belongs to you. The deal is practically done. The client is a very serious person. Yegor clenched his fists. I want to see her. Anton thought for a moment. Then his lips twisted into a smirk again. Very well. Let's go. Just don't expect a tearful reunion. She's a wild animal. She forgot you long ago. They walked across the center grounds. Animals sat in their enclosures. There were few of them, and longing was evident in each of their eyes. Anton walked ahead, talking about the difficulties of financing, about how he had heroically found the best option for each pet. Yegor wasn't listening. He was staring ahead, trying to make out a familiar, fiery silhouette. And then he saw her. Ira's enclosure was the largest and furthest away. She was lying on a high wooden platform, her red side exposed to the sun. She looked enormous. A powerful, graceful predator, the true mistress of the taiga. Yegor's heart froze with delight and pain. She was beautiful, and she was completely wild. Yegor approached the very edge of the fence. Ira, he called softly. The lynx slowly turned her head. Her ears with their tufts twitched nervously. She looked at him, with a long, cold, appraising gaze. There was nothing in her eyes. No recognition, no curiosity. Only the detached calm of a predator who sees another two-legged creature in front of her. She yawned, revealing impressive fangs, and turned away. To her, he was nothing. Anton smirked smugly behind him. I told you, 5 years. She's not a dog. Her instincts have erased everything. To her, you're a stranger. Inside, Yegor felt like his heart had been ripped out. His father was right. Anton was right. He had come all this way for nothing. He was too late. Not by 2 days. By 5 whole years. Devastated, he turned silently and walked away from the enclosure, toward his car. To his only friend, who definitely hadn't forgotten him. He walked over to the UAZ and opened the door. Grom jumped out happily, wagging his tail. The dog rubbed against his owner's legs, trying to cheer him up. Yegor sat down on the ground, hugged the dog around the neck, and buried his face in its thick fur. It was all over. He just had to leave. But Grom suddenly tensed up. He raised his head, sniffed the air, and froze. His ears pricked up. He looked toward the enclosures. Whimpering softly, he slowly moved forward, as if pulled by an invisible force. Yegor looked up. Grom, come here, he shouted. But the dog didn't listen. He walked straight to Ira's enclosure. Anton grimaced when he saw this. Get the dog away. The last thing we need is for it to scare the animal before it's sold. But it was too late. Thunder approached the fence. Ira, lying on the platform, sensed him. Her body tensed instantly. She jumped to her feet. But it wasn't a threatening stance. It was something else. Slowly, on half-bent legs, she began to descend from the platform. Her eyes were fixed on the dog. The center's employees, who had come out to investigate the noise, froze. Anton prepared to shout. Yegor jumped to his feet, unable to believe what was happening. And at that moment, the silence was broken by a sound that sent shivers down everyone's spine. It wasn't a growl or a hiss. It was a deep, vibrating, guttural sound, like a loud purr mixed with a quiet growl. Ira rushed toward the fence, not in a furious attack. She ran into the metal fence and began desperately rubbing her muzzle against it, trying to reach the dog. Grom, in turn, seemed to go mad with joy. He whined and wagged his tail so hard that it looked like it was about to break off. He jumped up and down, trying to push his nose through the mesh to lick his friend. And he succeeded. He reached her nose, and the lynx froze, closing her eyes in pleasure. Everyone standing around froze. Veterinarian Anton stood with his mouth open. The center's employees looked at each other in complete shock. They had never, ever seen anything like this in their lives. The wild, unsociable lynx, which had not let anyone near her, was behaving like a domestic kitten that had found its owner. But she was not happy to see a human. She was happy to see a dog. Anton was the first to come to his senses. "Get that dog away," he yelled, taking a step toward the enclosure. Ira's reaction was instant and terrifying. The tenderness in her eyes was replaced by icy fury. She turned, pressed herself against the fence, and let out such a low, guttural growl that Anton's hair stood on end. She made it clear, "Don't come near. He's mine." The veterinarian recoiled, turning pale. He looked from the lynx to the dog, his brain refusing to comprehend what was happening. Igor, recovering from his initial shock, slowly approached the enclosure. Now Ira noticed him. She shifted her gaze from Grom to the man. She looked at him for a few seconds, and something new flashed in her wild, honey-colored eyes. Recognition. Slowly, without taking her eyes off him, she approached the spot on the fence where Yegor was standing. She purred softly and rubbed against the bars, right under his hand. With a trembling hand, Yegor touched her thick fur. She did not pull away. She pressed herself even closer. The animal's memory proved stronger than time. What is this?" stammered one of the center's employees. Anton came to his senses, his face contorted with anger. This taiga dog was ruining all his plans. "This doesn't change anything," he shouted. "It's just a random reaction to a familiar smell. The deal is still on. The buyer is already on his way, and you, Sokolov, get off the property. Otherwise, I'll call the police." He took out his phone, showing that he wasn't joking. Yegor looked at Anton, then at Ira, who was standing close to him and Grom, and realized that a simple conversation wouldn't be enough. The fight for Ira was just beginning, and it would be much more dangerous than a battle with fire in the burning taiga. Anton's threat hung in the air, heavy and sticky like a spider's web. But Yegor didn't flinch. He had been through too much to be scared by the cries of a coward. He straightened up and looked the veterinarian straight in the eye. His voice was quiet, but in the ringing silence, it sounded louder than any scream. "Call them," he said calmly. "Let them come. Let them look. And then let them explain on what grounds they are separating two creatures who remember each other after 5 years. He glanced at the stunned employees of the center. "You all saw it. You're human beings, not machines. Are you really going to let them do this?" The employees looked away. They were afraid. Afraid of losing their jobs, afraid of Anton's wrath. But Yegor saw doubt in their eyes. The seed of truth had been sown. Anton turned red with rage. He hadn't expected such resistance from a simple taiga worker. "This is private property. I will charge you with trespassing and attempted theft," he hissed. Yegor smiled bitterly. "Theft? Anton Viktorovich, you're a veterinarian, a doctor. Your job is to heal and help. But you're selling souls. Living souls." He took his old, battered phone out of his pocket. His fingers trembled slightly, but he found the number he was looking for in his address book. It was a contact he had saved just in case. A young journalist from the regional newspaper, Alina. A year ago, she had written a big article about poachers, and Yegor had helped her a lot with the material. She was honest and determined. "Alina, hello. This is Yegor Sokolov, the gamekeeper. I have a story that the whole world needs to see, right now." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Alina's quick, businesslike voice. Yegor? What's happened? Give me the address. I'll be there as soon as I can. Anton, overhearing the conversation, realized that the situation was getting out of control. Journalists. That was the last thing he needed. His deal was shady, almost illegal. Publicity could ruin everything. What are you doing? He growled, stepping toward Yegor. Give me the phone. He tried to wrestle the device from the hunter's hands. But Yegor, though calm, had spent his entire life in the taiga. His reaction was lightning fast. He stepped aside, and Anton's hand grabbed at thin air. At that moment, Grom, who had been standing nearby the whole time, let out a low, warning growl. The dog didn't move, but his whole posture said that one more step toward his master and he would attack. Even Ira in the enclosure tensed up, watching the scene. Anton backed away. He realized that force would get him nowhere. Fine, we'll play your game, he said through clenched teeth. But when the buyer arrives, it'll be too late. The money has been paid. The documents have been signed. Your journalists will just film a touching report about the farewell. He was confident in his righteousness, in the power of money and paperwork. Yegor knew he didn't have much time. He turned back to the enclosure. Grom, come here, he called. The dog approached, and the magic began again. Ira approached the fence, and she and Grom began their silent exchange once more. They rubbed noses, whimpered quietly, and growled. Yegor turned on the camera on his phone. He filmed everything. He filmed Thunder's muzzle sticking through the mesh. He filmed Ira's eyes, which were filled with incredible tenderness. He filmed how a huge wild predator allowed a dog to lick its fur. He turned the camera to the center's employees, to their shocked faces. Then to Anton, whose face was contorted into a malicious grimace. Here, Yegor said into his phone, describing everything to Alina. Here's the proof. These aren't just animals. This is a family. A family they want to destroy for money. At that moment, one of the employees, an elderly man who had worked at the center longer than anyone else, approached him. Peter was telling the truth, he said quietly to Yegor, glancing at Anton. This Orlov has been selling animals on the side for a long time. He sold many of the written-off animals to private zoos. We never saw any documents. He did everything himself. It was a bombshell. Now it was no longer just a moral choice, but a criminal offense. Anton realized that he had been overheard. He rushed over to the old man. Shut up, Semyonik, or you'll find yourself out on the street tomorrow without severance pay. But it was too late. Yegor had recorded everything. Now he not only had a video of a unique friendship, but also witness testimony. Time dragged on agonizingly slowly. Yegor waited for the journalist. Anton waited for the buyer. Each of them understood that whoever arrived first would decide Ira's fate. Grom and Ira seemed oblivious to everything around them. They were in their own world, making up for 5 years of separation. And there was something unbearably fragile about this idyll. In the distance, the rumble of an engine could be heard. But it wasn't the rattling sound of Alina's old car. It was the powerful, bass-heavy roar of an expensive engine. Yegor's heart sank. He was too late. A triumphant smile spread across Anton's face. He had won. A few seconds later, a huge black SUV with tinted windows slowly drove into the center's grounds. It stopped not far from the enclosure. The engine fell silent. An oppressive silence descended. The driver's door slowly opened. A tall man in an expensive suit got out of the car, looking strange against the backdrop of the neglected grounds. He glanced coldly and authoritatively at everyone and stopped at Anton. "Orlov, I hope the goods are ready. I don't have much time." The buyer's appearance changed the balance of power. The man's authoritative tone, his expensive clothes, his black SUV, all screamed money and influence. The center's employees cowered, trying to make themselves invisible. Anton Orlov, on the contrary, perked up. He ran up to the visitor obsequiously. "Ivan Sergeyevich, everything is ready, as agreed. Here you are, the best specimen. Clean, healthy, rare color." He gestured broadly toward the enclosure where Ira was kept. The man called Ivan Sergeyevich slowly approached the fence, not even glancing at Yegor and Grom. He took a thin cigar from his jacket pocket and lit it, examining the lynx appraisingly. Ira, sensing the unfamiliar smell and threat emanating from the newcomer, tensed up. The tenderness in her eyes gave way to cold fury. She crouched down, the hair on her neck standing on end. A low, warning growl escaped from her chest. Grom, standing next to Yegor, also growled, baring his fangs. He stood so as to shield his master, ready to rush to his defense at any moment. Ivan Sergeyevich smiled, exhaling a cloud of fragrant smoke. "Character. That's good. I like it when an animal has character. It means it's not broken." He turned to Anton. "Pack it up. The transport box is in the car. Did you prepare the sleeping pills?" "Yes, of course. Ivan Sergeyevich, the best medicine." Anton bustled about. "A couple of minutes and she'll be sleeping like a baby." Yegor realized that this was the end. He didn't stand a chance against this man, but he couldn't just stand there and watch. He took a step forward. "Wait." Ivan Sergeyevich slowly turned his head toward him. His gaze was cold as steel. He looked at Yegor as if he were an annoying insect. "Who are you?" "My name is Yegor Sokolov. I saved this lynx from a fire when she was a kitten. You can't take her away." A look of surprise flashed across Ivan Sergeyevich's face, quickly replaced by a sneer. "You saved her? Good for you. Take a pie from the shelf. I'm buying her. Orlov, take him away. He's in my way." Anton readily stepped toward Yegor, but he didn't move. "She's not a thing to be bought and sold," Yegor said firmly. "Can't you see what's happening? She recognized her family." He pointed to Grom, who was staring intently at the buyer. Ivan Sergeyevich looked at the dog, then back at the lynx, which was darting around the enclosure, growling at the dog and at the people. He frowned. The scene he was witnessing clearly did not fit into his worldview. He was a collector, a connoisseur of rare items. And this connection between two different predators was something new and incomprehensible to him. But he had no intention of backing down. "An interesting phenomenon," he said. "But that doesn't change anything. I'm paying money. A lot of money. With that money, I can buy anything I want, including her memory, if necessary." He threw his cigar on the ground and crushed it with the toe of his expensive shoe. "Anton, get to work. I don't have time for sentimentality." Anton, encouraged by the support of his influential buyer, took a syringe and a small vial from his briefcase. He began to draw the clear liquid into the syringe. Yegor realized that he only had seconds left. He rushed to the enclosure and stood in front of the door, blocking it with his body. "I won't let you do this," he shouted. Grom stood next to him, baring his teeth. The situation had reached a boiling point. Ivan Sergeyevich frowned even more. He did not tolerate such open defiance. "You don't seem to understand who you're talking to, kid," he said in an icy tone. "I have ways of dealing with problems like this, very quickly and effectively. And at that very tense moment, when it seemed that a clash was inevitable, an old, battered car flew into the center, kicking up dust. A girl with a camera around her neck jumped out of it. It was Alina. A cameraman with a camera on his shoulder ran after her. She saw the whole scene. Yegor and the dog protecting the enclosure, Anton with a syringe, and the influential man by the black SUV. With professional instinct, she realized that she had stumbled into the epicenter of a story. "What's going on here?" she asked loudly, pointing her camera at Ivan Sergeyevich. "Are you trying to illegally remove an animal from a rehabilitation center?" The appearance of journalists came as a complete surprise to Anton and his client. Ivan Sergeyevich's face changed instantly. A public scandal was the last thing he needed. His business and his reputation could not withstand such media attention. He glared at Anton, who stood frozen with the syringe in his hand. "Orlov, what the hell? You said everything would be quiet," he hissed. Anton stammered something in response. Alina, meanwhile, was already next to Yegor. "Yegor, tell them. The camera is rolling." And Yegor began to speak. He told them everything. About the fire, about the rescue, about how Ira grew up with Grom, about the call from the old employee, about how Ira recognized them. The cameraman filmed everything. Yegor, the unique behavior of the animals, Anton's confused face, and Ivan Sergeyevich's enraged expression. "That's a lie," Anton squealed, realizing that his career, and perhaps his freedom, were hanging by a thread. "He made it all up. He's just a self-appointed gamekeeper." But his words sounded unconvincing. Ivan Sergeyevich assessed the situation and made a decision. He was no fool and understood that if this story made it into the news, it would cause him enormous problems. His reputation was worth more than any lynx, even the most exotic. He shot Anton a withering glance. "You owe me, Orlov, and you'll pay me back every penny." With these words, he turned around, silently got into his SUV, and making a sharp turn, left the center. He drove away. Anton was left alone with Yegor, the journalists, and his own betrayal. He dropped the syringe on the ground. The game was over. Answer. With the departure of the black SUV, the tension subsided, leaving behind a hollow emptiness. Anton Orlov stood in the middle of the courtyard like a fish thrown ashore, staring blankly after the disappearing car. His world, built on lies and easy money, had collapsed in an instant. Alina didn't waste any time. She asked questions while the cameraman continued filming. Semyonik, emboldened, approached her and began to tell her about the veterinarian's other schemes. The story grew with new, much more serious details. It was no longer about a single lynx, but about an entire system of illegal trade in wild animals. Yegor stepped aside. His mission was accomplished. He looked at Ira. The lynx, sensing that the danger had passed, calmed down. She approached the fence again and rubbed against Yegor's hand. Grom wagged his tail happily. Victory. But what next? The problem at the center of it all hadn't gone away. It was still on the verge of closure. Alina's report aired that same evening. The story of the incredible friendship between a lynx and a dog, the devotion of a simple gamekeeper, and the cynicism of a veterinary businessman shook the entire region. The story was shown on the Central Channel. The phone in the editorial office was ringing off the hook. People offered help, money, or simply expressed their admiration for Yegor's actions. Ira's story became a symbol of the fight for justice, a reminder that there is still room in the world for true feelings and loyalty. The rehabilitation center was raided. Law enforcement agencies took an interest in Anton Orlov's activities. It turned out that he was connected to a whole network of poachers. the very same ones that Yegor had been fighting in the taiga. Anton was just a small link in a large criminal chain. A windfall came to the Hope Center. Sponsors and patrons appeared. Fundraising began. In a few weeks, enough money was raised not only to pay off all the debts, but also to completely renovate the center. The center had a future. The director, an elderly and tired man who had already given up, personally called Yegor and thanked him. He offered Yegor a place on the board of trustees of the new, revived center. "You, Yegor Romanovich, are the conscience of this place. We need you," he said. Yegor agreed. He understood that now he was responsible not only for Ira, but for all the other inhabitants of Nadezhda. Ira's fate was sealed. There was no longer any talk of selling her. Moreover, thanks to sponsorship, a new, huge enclosure was built for her, as close as possible to her natural habitat. It had real trees, rocks, and a small stream. But one question remained: what to do about her incredible attachment to Grom? Separating them again would be cruel. After lengthy discussions with experts, an unprecedented decision was made. Grom was granted official status as an honorary visitor to the center, with unrestricted access to its territory. Another year passed. Yegor arrived at the renovated center with his family. His little daughter Katya looked with delight at the animals she had heard so much about from her father. But they had not come just for a tour. Today was a special day. Today, Iru was being released into her new home. A huge area of forest, fenced off by a high but almost invisible net. Yegor approached the old enclosure. Next to him, as always, was his faithful friend Grom. The door opened. Ira, who had become even stronger and more beautiful over the past year, came out hesitantly. She looked around, breathing in the new smells. And then she saw Grom. The scene of their meeting was repeated, but now it was even more touching. There were no bars separating them. The lynx ran up to the dog, and they began to play as they had long ago in their distant childhood. They rolled around in the grass, chasing each other, completely happy. Yegor watched them, a smile on his face. He had done everything he could. He had kept his promise. Ira had found a real home where she was safe, but not in a cage, and her most loyal friend was by her side. Suddenly, Ira stopped playing. She walked up to Yegor and nudged his hand with her big head. It was her way of saying, "Thank you." In her wild, honey-colored eyes, there was no longer any fear or cold detachment. There was wisdom, calmness, and endless gratitude to the man who had twice saved her from death. Yegor hugged the mighty predator around the neck. At that moment, he understood a simple truth. It didn't matter how much time passed, 5 years or 50. True affection does not rust or disappear. It is like a taiga cedar, only growing stronger with age, sprouting roots deep into the heart. And no force in the world can destroy it. The story of Yegor, Grom, and Ira became a legend. It reminded people that compassion is stronger than greed, and that loyalty knows no boundaries. It taught that even one person, guided by their heart, can change the world for the better. And somewhere out there in the Siberian taiga, the red lynx still lives, never having made friends with the other lynxes. Because her family will always be the man and the dog who rescued her from the fire long ago. What do you think was the main factor that helped Yegor save Ira the second time? His own stubbornness, the unique bond between the animals, or the timely intervention of journalists?